Yeah, so it's interesting. We think of it as if we're going to accumulate fatigue throughout a set, it has to make sense. And again, I think for track and field, it can and cannot make sense depending on what you're trying to elicit. So for us, the cluster, based on the research that we've seen, obviously allows us to kind of allow the energy systems to regain some ATP, whether it's a lot or not at all. Sometimes it doesn't feel like that much recovery basis, but we're typically operating off of a 15-second to a 25-second cluster set, to just allow for some of that immediate recovery to happen, because we are at some higher percentages. And while we could push through those percentages under a constant rep kind of management of, if we have 5 sets of 3, that you're doing 3 in a row versus 5 sets of 3 with a 15 to 25-second kind of cluster implementation off the tempo, it just allows the athlete to kind of reset, in our opinion, and also provide a higher intent and increase their output, because they do have a little bit of that kind of recovery aspect within the sets. And again, I do think that can work for a variety of sports. Particularly for us, we just find that it has the most value with these, because there is so much rest between specific movements within a practice set. Even if, I was at practice the other day and I saw some repeat 10-meter sprints, or some 10-meter accelerations, if you will, where it was kind of, we have to get through a certain number of 10-meter accelerations in a specific amount of time, but there is a rest component implemented between each rep. That's pretty similar to what a cluster is for me in terms of what the timeline is. A 10-meter sprint for us is probably anywhere from between 1 and 2 seconds, maybe a little bit shorter depending on how fast you are. But ultimately, that could be a rep for us. Obviously, some reps at a higher intensity may take a little bit longer, but even when we start pushing that to 20, 30 meters, with that rest in between of about 15 to 25 seconds that we're seeing elicited at practice, it really meets the same energy demands and also the same muscular output that we're trying to meet for the needs of that practice component. Which, again, if I'm trying to elicit you to have the best practice as possible so your coaches can turn that practice in the best competition as possible, I think meeting those demands is incredibly important. And for us, it's just elicited a lot of really great feedback from our students as well, because they feel like, when we are pushing into those high 80s, low 90%, that they have the ability to kind of reset mentally, which is very track oriented in the sense that it's you versus you, it's you versus your implement, or it's you versus your lane. And so when you can kind of continue to train that kind of mental aspect of what the sport is as well, I think it does help transfer over.
Go back to some of the things that you were saying about the soccer. Obviously, you mentioned that during preseason or that off-season period, you obviously don't, like, you're kind of expecting things to drop off and jumping not to be the same high performance and a little bit more of fatigue accumulation. How do you explain that to them in terms of, okay, we're still going to test, we're still going to figure out what's happening, but we're not essentially, we know that's going to happen, we do care, but again, we're not really going to change anything
Sure.
because of it.
Yeah, so again, that protocol changes in the sense that in season, we will test before every lift for our jumps, and we will train on a average week, twice a week. We do match day -2 for both days. So if we have a Thursday, Sunday game, we'll lift on a Tuesday and we'll lift on a Friday. That Friday lift is obviously significantly different than our Tuesday lift. It's a little bit more what we consider like kind of a regen metabolic activity day, where there's really no major compound movements with it. It's more hitting auxiliary pieces that we need to kind of elicit health overall. But a lot of times they're coming off of travel, so we just want to get them moving. That original Tuesday lift, the first match day -2 versus the match day +1 going into the Sunday game, is a lot more of our compound stuff. But when we test on both those days, we have the educational piece with how we talk to our athletes. Obviously, we are probably expecting this Tuesday jump pre-lift to be higher than the Friday jump, just because we're coming off a significant game load there and we haven't had a day off yet. And so that first day coming off a day off allows us to typically have a lot better recovery from a sleep perspective, and also a regrouping on the nutrition and hydration perspective coming off a Sunday game that allows us to have a little bit more output. But the off season and the way that we explain that is significantly different in that we will only test on the first lift of the week. We won't test every day because we know that the accumulation of that fatigue based on us training now 3 times a week, adding in speed and agility sessions, adding in a conditioning session on top of your practice versus just having the weight room followed by practice and game in the in season is going to accumulate a lot more. And so coming off of that weekend of hopefully some off days, we know that that's going to be them at their least fatigue point. And so we try to set them up for success in the sense that we'll only test on that first lift because typically that first lift has occurred before we've done any other